Welcome back, everyone. So in this tutorial, this is part 2 of cartridge development, and we'll learn how to create cartridge development recipes or load data. We already created and viewed other tutorials, so how to manage primers, powder, projectiles, cases. And that's very important because this is where we start tying these things together. So let's assume that I want to create a load recipe. Let's say 357, and I'll be developing a hunting load. So 357, I'll be using a 158 grain projectile, and I'll be using 12 grains of powder. It's good to, or we have to rather, group recipes in groups. So if you have many recipes of one, they have to belong to a group. These are my test data. So what we do is we'll create a new group and we'll say 357 hunting, and we'll save this. And then we can select our group that we've just created. Firearm, so we can leave this blank, or we can select the firearm that we want to use or we want to develop this load for. So I always recommend using this, but you don't have to. So it's not mandatory. Next one is actually tying this all together. So cases, projectile module, primer module, this is where we've defined all of our data, and we're going to now select 357 case. We're going to select the right projectile, the right powder, primer, sorry, if I can find it. Here it is, and the right powder. Next, we'll move to load data. So this is, excuse me, freeform will say, yep, we're using 12 grains of powder. We'll select the units. Throw adjustment, if you're using a thrower, you can actually add a note how to, or where those 12 grains are on the scale, 3 notches from the top, or turn the lever 3 turns to the right, whatever. And where did you actually find this particular weight reference? So we'll say from projectile website, but this can be a website URL, a book, or you can just leave this blank. That's up to you. So mandatory fields are the ones with the red asterisk. We'll say we've loaded 10 cartridges. And if we are testing, we obviously want to add the overall length. So I'm going to leave this blank just to save time, but we can add averages, or we can, pardon me, we can add individual cartridges. Let's say we are going to select units first. So I'll work in millimeters, and I'll say 45, I'll say 47, I'll say 48, and I'm just doing this to demonstrate that it's calculating. It's just easier to see when we're using extreme numbers and we've measured the overall length rather than from the ogive. At this point, we've entered all the information we need to actually create a recipe. So we've saved, and from here we can actually print a label to go into the ammo box. So it's right here, it'll be generated for us. Or we can print a full report to do with this cartridge. So everything we've done, assembly, all the overall measurements, performance we haven't filled in yet, and all the components. So it's read from different component modules, including images that we've uploaded. If we exit this, we'll see that our cartridge recipe is here. We'll see that it hasn't been fired. Note that cases have been used, so 10 cases. And if we look at projectiles, we'll see that from this batch we've just used up 10 projectiles, 10 primers, And if we look at powder, we'll see that we've used up some of the powder as well. Going back to cartridge development recipe, we can now proceed to part 2 of this tutorial, and it'll be covered in the next tutorial, obviously. Sorry, part 3, not part 2. And that's entering performance data and actually returning cases back to their fired form and generating a few more reports. But for this tutorial, the basic form of creating a recipe, we're done. The only thing that's probably worth noting is the load ammo module, and it's a very small module. It's a convenience feature where you can click it and you can actually see what ammo you have loaded on hand and pointing to the recipe. So that about does it for this tutorial. Stay tuned for the next part where we're going to learn, or we're going to continue cartridge development recipe tutorials. Thanks.